Okay. Good evening, graduate UNSY students. First, as a reminder, we are recording this session. A copy is going to be made available for those who are unable to attend tonight. Next, the format of our meeting. I will start by introducing our guest. Then we'll proceed into a Q&A discussion after their presentation. And then we'll open up to a wider class led Q&A. In the meantime, I do ask that you all mute your mics, save any questions to the very end, and use the hand raise icon to indicate when you do have a question. I'll call on each of you in order as best I can. With that, I am really excited to welcome you to the 41st session of the UNSY Guest SME Speaker Series. This is the second of 3 for this term. I'm Dr. Brent Terwilliger, the Program Coordinator for the Master of Science in Uncrewed and Autonomous Systems degree here at Embry-Riddle Worldwide. Tonight, we're joined by our guest subject matter expert, Justin Jaeger. Justin's the Regional Aviation Manager and Safety Specialist for the National Park Service, Intermountain Region, with a career spanning wildland fire, aviation, and UAS integration. He began building trails with the National Park Service before joining the Arrowhead Hotshots as a wildland firefighter. After 2 years, he moved to Alaska as a fire specialist with the Alaska Fire Services for another 5 years. He then led a heli-tac crew in Nevada for 7 years while earning a master's in natural resource management. He later became the interagency aviation officer at Grand Canyon National Park, where he launched the first National Park Service UAS program and co-founded the Interagency Fire UAS Committee to establish national standards and training. Currently, he serves on 5 regional aviation committees, chairs the Interagency Fire UAS Committee, and leads efforts in UAS operations, aviation reviews, and aviation safety assistance teams across geographic regions. With that, let's give a warm welcome to Justin. I'm excited to explore this technology together over the course of our discussion.
Great. Thanks, Brent. You got me?
Yep, loud and clear.
All right. Let me know when you got my presentation here.
Good to go.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for that great introduction, Brent. Happy to be here. I love talking about UAS. It's something I could just drone on and on about all day long. So that's a bad joke. You guys probably heard that one, but we'll move on. So as Brent mentioned, I'm the chair of the Interagency Fire UAS subcommittee, and that's what we're going to focus on mostly today. My day job is, as he said, the Intermountain Region Regional Aviation Manager for the National Park Service. So I oversee not just our UAS program, but also several of our fire and search and rescue helicopters, as well as a fixed wing program. So for IFUASS, which I'll refer to it for most of the rest of this presentation, we're nested under what's called the National Interagency Aviation Committee under the National Wildfire Coordinating Group. So that parent committee, NIAC, has all these different aviation committees that work underneath it. And as you can see here, unmanned aircraft systems is one of them. We also have airspace, air tankers, helicopters, water scoopers, helicopter scoopers, all these different things that fall underneath that chain. So as far as IFUASS specifically, our member organization is basically all of the land management agencies that do wildland fire. So National Park Service, Forest Service, BLM, BIA, Fish and Wildlife Service. And then we also have the Association of State Foresters, which includes all the state energy agencies such as CAL FIRE, Colorado DFPC. And then we also have the International Association of Fire Chiefs, which is going to be everyone outside of what I just said that is going to be operating UAS on a wildland fire. So that'd be your city fire departments, county fire departments, and those types of folks. We also have the Federal Aviation Administration and NASA as associate members. They're not voting members on our committee, but they are associate members that participate in our meetings and provide valuable input for us. So most of what I'm going to talk about tonight, if you just Google IFUASS, this will pop up. You can go to our website. It has a lot of great information about what we do, how we operate, our roster. If you want to get in touch with any of the members from any of the agencies on there, a lot of our correspondence, our policy documents, all those kinds of fun things on there. So the mission of IF UASSS is to provide that national leadership to develop and disseminate guidance for the use of UAS on wildland fire management operations. We do dabble a bit in non-wildland fire operations, so large scale disasters or events of national significance where we're bringing in a lot of different assets to be managed at that federal level. And we also are starting to set some of the standards for those organizations also. Primary objectives for our group, you can read that up there, but basically we are providing guidance on the utilization, performance, risk management, qualifications, training, and equipment. We're going to talk a little bit about those, what we mean by that. What are we doing for qualifications, what performance, what's training, how we're determining what equipment that we're using out there on wildland fires. We're also providing coordinated unified UAS subject matter experts to NIAC, our parent committee, and NWCG, that National Wildfire Coordinating Group member agencies, and really dealing with anything that's interagency wildland fire as far as initiatives, proposals, and issues. We get a lot of questions from outside contractors, other folks that we try to internally handle or vet to see what is going to work or not work within the fire environment. Then identify and evaluate UAS related problems and hopefully develop and propose some solutions to those problems. So policy, everyone loves policy. Our main policy document that we all follow as an interagency community on wildland fires is this Standards for Fire UAS Systems Operations, PMS 515. Within this document, and this could be found online if anyone's interested in it, it is going to be up for a rewrite this year, or update, I guess, this year. We talk about UAS program administration. So regardless of what kind of agency you're coming from, what are some different administrative programmatic things you need to be thinking about? UAS typing and call signs. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a few more slides here. Everything in wildland fire is typed and categorized. So helicopters are typed and categorized, fire engines, crews, air tankers, everything. And UAS is no different. That's just how we order things up depending on what the need is and how that fulfills that mission that we're trying to do. We also talk a lot about mission planning and mobilization. If you get mobilized to a wildland fire, what does that look like? What are the resources you need to bring with you? One of the bigger ones is airspace coordination. You'll probably hear me say this several times during this presentation. Deconfliction, communication, coordination. Those are the three biggest things that we try to, or we have to integrate into a wildland fire of manned aircraft, the fire traffic area. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a few more slides too. The mission flight procedures, aircraft coordination and separation. Again, that goes to that communication, coordination, deconfliction, different safety considerations, job aids for the operations we're doing out there. And we also have a little bit with UAS incursion. So not when we're flying, but when we're having outside entities flying on the fire that we don't want there, right? And it has become a really big deal over the last couple of years. We just saw down on the Paradise Fire in California about a month ago that one of our CL-415s got a wing strike from a drone flying in our TFR. They weren't supposed to be there. So that's a pretty big deal. And we have some information on that, on how to appropriately call those in so we can either shut down our aviation operations or try to figure out who's out there and get them out of there. So again, all of our policy comes out of that PMS 515. I talked a little bit about airspace. So we have what we call the fire traffic area. And if anyone knows about this, I apologize. I don't want to talk down to you, but for those of you who don't, when we have a large fire, a large incident, we usually set up a temporary flight restriction, a TFR up there. Inside of that, or part of that, is this what we call the fire traffic area. And this is, again, how we communicate, coordinate, and deconflict the airspace. So long before there were drones, we had a fire traffic area where we'd have aerial supervision, air tankers coming in at a certain altitude, helicopters working at a certain altitude. We clear out helicopters, bring in low-level air tankers, clear them out, bring the helicopters back in. Now we're trying to figure out, or our task when we started this was, how do we integrate UAS into the manned aircraft world to make everyone safe and everyone feel warm and fuzzy about what we're doing? So that was a big part of this. So as far as some of our flight schools and training, For all of our folks who are operating on a wildland fire, this is agency, all agencies that are going to be showing up to a wildland fire. First and foremost, they're going to have their Part 107. That's a prerequisite. And then they're going to have to take a course called A450, which is a basic, how do you jiggle the sticks? You know, what are the flight characteristics of a drone that we're flying, things like that. Then you have to go to, on the top of the screen there, S373. It's UAS for incident operations. And this is where we really get into that deconfliction communication coordination. What call outs are you making? How are you ensuring that you've talked to the aerial supervision or the helicopters or the helibase or whoever needs to be communicated with on that fire? So that the IAT class is a 1 week class at A450, and then another week-long course for that 373. Right there on the screen, primary objective, safe operations, communication, coordination, deconfliction. And then advanced from that is aerial ignition. We're going to go into aerial ignition in a few more slides in a little bit more in depth. That's a big part of what we do, is starting fires using the drones. Really great tool, decreases the risk. We've had some unfortunate fatality incidents with helicopter low level doing aerial ignitions, and that was a big push to change this to the unmanned world, right, where we don't have that same human aspect of it up in the air. So all of our folks, we have pilot standards and karting that we do. All those classes I just mentioned. Once you're done with that 373 class, that incident operations, you get a task book where you actually physically go out to a fire and start flying under the supervision of a qualified UAS pilot. While you're doing that, you'll be going through the remote pilot tasks, remote pilot evaluations. You'll have pilot evaluators. That's who they are. They'll be signing off the tasks in your task book. And then you'll have a final evaluator you'll go out with, kind of put you through the ringer, making sure that you understand how to safely operate on a large scale incident. So we have 4 designated positions within NWCG for operating on a wildland fire. This could change in the future depending on what technologies come in. But right now, UASP, and I know there's a lot of words on this here, so I apologize, but UASP or UAS pilot is your basic pilot out there flying around doing situational awareness. Maybe they're doing some aerial ignition, things like that. The next is UASL. We saw a need that when we have several UAS pilots out there with multiple UAS on an incident, that we need to coordinate. You know, what are the missions? What are the capabilities of the drones? Because a lot of our firefighting personnel may or may not have that information or that knowledge to make those good decisions. So this UASL position kind of herds them all together and is able to coordinate that effort of multiple UAS being on the same fire. Then we have UASM, a UAS manager. That's going to be managing one of our bigger contract type 1, type 2 UAS, which we're going to talk about here in a few more slides also. When we're contracting out, just like when we contract a helicopter, we have a helicopter manager for several reasons, for safety, to make sure the contract's being adhered to, things like that. Same thing with the UAS manager. That's the point of that one. Then UASD is a data specialist. You guys are all probably well aware, super easy to get a lot of data with a drone, right? You can fly, you can get a ton of information, but how do you use that information to make a usable product, in this case for the incident command team or for a division or whoever needs it on the fire? And a lot of times our USDs are going out with a UASM for the large scale contracts, just to make sure that from the contractor to what is needed from the incident command team is seamless as far as that information going back and forth. So US typing and call signs, and I almost hesitate to put this up because we came up with this several years ago, and drones have changed so dramatically since we first did this. And we know this needs an update, but in general, this kind of gets us in the ballpark. So the type 1 and type 2 are high endurance, long endurance aircraft. These are our contracted ones. Most of the agencies don't have these. These are the Overwatch Arrows, the Scan Eagles, these really big drones out there. Type 3 and type 4 are the smaller ones, the quadcopters or maybe some fixed wing. And most of these, or all of these right now for wildland fire operations, are agency owned for whoever's respective agency is out there flying that. So when we have call signs out there, when we're working with our aircraft out there, we determine that unmanned Romeo 3-1, that would come out to be, so you got unmanned R Romeo would be a rotor wing. Type 3 designation is that first 3, and then whoever's the first on the fire would pick up 1. So go 1 through 9, then you get 0, and if we have more than that on the fire, you start with alphanumeric. So you'd be unmanned Romeo 3 Alpha. That seems to work pretty good for us. All of our big type 1s would be like an unmanned Foxtrot 11. That's how we're calling. Helicopter 30 Bravo, Air Attack 573, whatever that is. That's just how we're talking, same jargon as all the other manned aircraft. So the Type 3 and 4 aircraft, like I mentioned, agency owned. We're working our comms on an FM channel, so a handheld air-to-ground channel that we're talking with our aerial supervision. Maybe we're talking to the helibase. Most of this is small-scale mapping and recon. Aerial ignition, again, a big part of what we're doing. We'll talk about that in 2 more slides here. Variable launch locations, that's a great part of this. Easily transported, as you guys are aware. We do require UASP, but they're not equipped with a Mode C transponder or ADSB, right? So we can't, other aircraft aren't picking them up in the airspace. These are some of the systems that we're using out there for the most part. The DOI is using a lot of the Skydios, the Anafi USAs. Alta X is our heavy lift right now that we're using for aerial ignition. Most of the federal agencies are required to have NDA compliant drones, so National Defense Authorization Act. There's a lot that we could have a whole nother discussion on that. I'll just breeze over right now, but just know there are some requirements that for the feds. So this is just a quick little video here showing one of our small UAS out there. You can see we're doing a big burnout around this road right here. So it's a great opportunity for real-time situational awareness. You have the infrared camera. Top right, you have the real-time. You can go back and forth. That's our fire map that you're looking at right there. Pretty interesting with this one. It's a great video to really sell what we're doing. So as it pans back to the left, you're going to see it starts to flare up, gets pretty hot. It's going to push a bunch of ambers over the road here quickly. So right there, you can see, okay, we have a lot of ambers, ashfall heading over the road. So a big part of this is we're going to go gridding for hotspots now. So on the right side, you can see our road where we want to hold the fire, our firing operations. You can see a lot of hotspots. Really hard for firefighters to see into this dense vegetation. We're flying around looking for hotspots, and you can see, hopefully you can see that there. Just picked one up, that little white spot in the center. So from the human eye driving up and down this road, you would never see that right away. The drone is a great tool for that. The operator is able to call for an engine. The engine's going to pop out from the bottom of the screen here pretty quickly. And they're able to say, hey, this is exactly where your spot fire is. Need you to head out. It's 20 yards from the road. You're going to head over there with a couple people and put that out for us. So there's the engine showing up. A couple people are going to hop out and go put that thing out. Our Type 2 and Type 1 UAS contracts, again, these are the bigger drones, and there's a lot of issues that we're finding with these out there. So these are contractor owned. So the comms are using, it might be an FM or an AM, so an air-to-air channels, because now we're up in the airspace when we're actually launching and stuff up there. So large-scale mapping recon, bigger equipment requires big trailers, big trucks, things that we have to think about as far as where we're going to set up a launch and recovery zone. Our contract requires that they have Mode C transponder ADSB, so they will be picked up by other aircraft up there. So there's a couple of quick videos. These are great for just overall situational awareness. Our contract requires them to be up for basically a shift, a whole period, so 8+ hours. Very hard environment for them to work in. I think a lot of the contractors didn't realize the density altitudes that we're operating at, as well as you're working in wildland fire smoke. You have a lot of updrafts, all these different wind shears, and just unique working environment that's on wildland fire that you don't see in a lot of other places here. And so a good case study, or use study, I should say, for these. In the morning briefings, we can live stream back to our incident command post. So when the firefighters get ready to head back out onto their division for the day, we can actually have the drone above them. I know for all the military folks on here, you've probably seen this all the time in your operating areas, but this is pretty new technology in the last 5 years for us. You can actually look real time. What's your division doing? What's the fire doing overnight? What's your fire activity right now before you're sending your resources out there to effectively engage in that fire? So this slide is from the U.S. Forest Service. They sent it over to me, but it's pretty typical of most of our agencies and just shows growth of UAS operations in the last couple of years. I'm sure all of you are aware of this too. The sky is the limit, so to speak. No pun intended on this, right? And we're just getting to start to use this as far as the number of flights that we're doing, the U.S. UAS pilots that we have, the aircraft, and everything's ramping up with this. So I think that's a very positive thing. A lot of safety benefits to using drones instead of manned aircraft out there. So one of the bigger things I alluded to that we use this for is aerial ignition operations. So that's a picture on the right of what one of our platforms, fully decked out with a Ignis aerial ignition platform, looks like. So again, there's a lot of training that goes on with this. So this is people who've already passed their Part 107, the A450, the 373, and now they're going to this Interagency Aerial Ignition Academy. And you can see there in the training history, we figured in about 2018, we had enough technology that we could drop enough spheres to make this worthwhile. So we started testing and evaluating, and then we went to our first Interagency US training in 19. And then we've moved to an Aerial Ignition Academy. What I mean by that is our folks show up there. Again, they're highly skilled. They've already been signed off as UAS pilots. They have experience in wildland fires. Now they're going to this academy. They're going to learn how to use the aerial ignition device that's on the UAS. And not only that, but they're going to get a chance to go out and use it real time. So we're going to go out. We have prescribed fires. We'll send them out. They're going to be burning real time over a 2 to 3 week period. Once they're done with that academy, they're going to get a task sheet where they still need to go out onto a wildland fire and perform the same task under the supervision of a qualified, get signed off, and be good to go. So just a couple specs on that right now with what we're using, about a 30 minutes of flight time. The range really varies depending on the topography and the fuel type. And by fuel type, I mean vegetation. So if we're in a light, flashy fuel like grass, we can just drop very minimal spheres and make a lot of distance really quick. If you're in something heavy like a southern pine timber, something like that, you're going to have to put a lot more spheres in an area to get the effects that you want from that wildland fire or from that fire that we're putting down. So all of them are equipped with both the standard view and infrared. We do fly beyond visual line of sight when we're in a TFR. We do have those authorizations. If we're not in a TFR, we don't have one established, or you're on a prescribed fire, we can do extended visual line of sight up to what the FAA allows us to do with that. We do have night operations approved. And currently with our latest versions of the PSD, plastic sphere dispensers, what that stands for, machine, we have what we call dragon eggs. That's what the company calls them. So that's what we call them, the little ignition spheres, and full strength antifreeze. So it gets injected with antifreeze, and that's the catalyst that makes them start on fire. So it gets injected, drops to the ground, and they start on fire. So right now we have a maximum load of 450 spheres. We can drop about 120 spheres a minute if we have to, because you can see how quickly that could go. But in the future, we're hoping to see 1,000, 4,000 sphere hoppers and increase flight time whenever we get the new technology with the drones. So we do have wildfire versus prescribed fire operations. Both fall under our purview of IFUSS and coming up with the training and qualifications. But we have what we call a PASP or a MAS, so a Project Aviation Safety Plan or a Mission Aviation Safety Plan. So some sort of plan for what we're doing out there. What are we doing? How are we going to do it? An approved firing plan. So a lot of times you can see down there we have to have a firing boss. So somebody who understands firing dynamics, what the objectives are. Are we trying to, blast some holes in the canopy of the trees? Are we trying to do a low intensity fire to save a watershed? There's all different things. There's a whole science behind burning out there. And so UAS is just another tool to help us with that, to meet those objectives out there. So again, if we're flying in a TFR, we can do beyond visual line of sight. If we don't, we're doing extended visual line of sight. We'll have some folks out there to help us with that. We're putting up a NOTAM out there too to help deconflict that airspace. This picture right there, that's what it looks like after that very far left-hand side there. You can see that's what it starts to look like when it burns together. That second little dots of fire, that's what it looks like when we're dropping those spheres as we're flying along there. Again, some of the same things here in mission planning, launch and recovery locations. We have to be pretty careful that, where where are we going to be starting fire, and then we don't want to come back and land there, right? So some lessons that we've learned along the way. Um, and then also, I think I have it on here. Yeah, some geofencing to prevent the mishap. So we have some pretty good software that allow us to look at the burn area and decide how many spheres we want to put down in certain areas, depending on the vegetation, and geofence. So we don't just inadvertently go past the area, our holding road, our containment lines, or even worse yet, a lesson learned is you don't want to just have it get stuck and dropping spheres all the way back to you, back to where you're going to land that thing. So, we're always learning, we're always getting better, which is a good thing. Here's just a real quick video. This is what our ground control station will show us. You can see it's dropping spheres right now. It basically pinpoints where every sphere is going down, which is pretty incredible. And again, you can either pre-program this or you can kind of fly the sticks depending on what the need is out there. And so then at the end of the mission, you can back out of it and give the oops, sorry about that. You can back out of it and give them a real good view of what you just burned, right? So then you can get that real-time situational awareness, make sure that's meeting the objectives of wherever the burn is. So I mentioned we have had some mishaps, some lessons learned with our agency, our type 3, type 4 drones. Usually it's battery issues that we've seen, some airspace issues, and not always just with us. It's also sometimes with our manned aircraft not doing the correct communication, coordination, deconfliction. So it's not always the UAS operator. We see it on both sides. Props, some human air stuff. And then with the call Juanita, the type 1s, the type 2s, again, as I mentioned at the very beginning, there'll be a lot of wind shear, environmental stuff that are not used to flying in these conditions. Their drones work perfectly when it's a nice day and they're flying out and doing things. But when you get into heavy smoke, you get into these big updrafts that fires can produce, there can be a lot of issues. And so with a lot of our type 1s and type 2s, our first 3.5 years, we didn't have a single mission where they didn't crash a drone, either on takeoff or landing. So that was some lessons learned. We've rewritten that contract this year. The only drone that we're going to have on there is Overwatch Aero, the FVR 90. That's the only one that's met contract specs as far as the density altitudes that we need them to operate at, as well as the LRZ is the launch and recovery zone that we have to have an area for them to do that. So again, if you think about a TFR, we have to be flying in a TFR with these. If we can't launch and recover in that TFR, then we have to do some airspace coordination. Maybe we extend a galleyway, so to speak, to get that drone over to the fire traffic area in the TFR. So, but Brent, that's kind of what I had for you guys today. I hope that met your intent, and happy to take any questions when you're ready.
Absolutely, that was tremendous. So I'll get us kicked off with a few, and hopefully this will spark some inquiry from the students. So you mentioned reducing risk to conventionally piloted operations using UAS, where you'd pull a rotary wing out and put UAS in their place. What other advantages have you seen with UAS compared to traditional aviation assets? And as well, the counterpoint to that, what are the weaknesses that limit their use right now?
Yeah, great question. So, obviously cost is a big part of it. Some of our helicopters doing a similar mission can be extensively more or exponentially more expensive, I should say, than a drone. So I'd say that the cost right now is one of the driving forces. I mean, the safety was always the huge selling point, especially when we're looking at replacing some of those missions. Now, what can't be done with drones yet? Some of the big heavy lift stuff, troop transportation, water delivery as far as in buckets, things like that. Is that technology coming? I'm sure it is. There's people already working on it. But for what we're doing right now, it's not at a place that we can do that. So there's still a lot of missions that are going to have to be done by helicopters or airplanes or fixed wing until the technology meets up to that. But I have no doubt, if we fast forward 10, 20 years from now, most all of that could be replaced by drones.
With rapidly evolving UAS technology, how do you and your team stay up to date with the latest advancements? Do you attend shows, demos, or do you get hands-on experience with evaluation platforms?
Yeah, so we have so the Department of Interior has the Office of Aviation Services who is in charge of looking at all the new platforms, and the Forest Service has that wing too, or their own office like that also. In each of the state agency stuff, they're doing their own things too. So there's a lot of that. We do go to a lot of trade shows, the wherever those are held. And then we also had, like I mentioned at the very beginning, we have the FAA and NASA as also members, associate members of our group. And NASA's really good. They're super forward thinking, a lot of new technologies that they're testing, and they're bringing that over to us to see what that value is. So again, I get hit up all the time about somebody having the latest and greatest drone for either fire or search and rescue, and it's just really vetting that out and letting them know the environments they're going to be working in, um, and I'm hoping that someday somebody does have the next best one out there. So
That's great to see that cross-organizational collaboration occurring. Uh, you mentioned, you think this technology in 10 to 20 years, it's going to be amazing. What are the emerging UAS technologies or even the regs at this point that you're watching, specifically those with the potential to impact wildland fire and aviation operations in the near term?
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of things in concept right now, like swarm technology. So if we can't get drones that carry a lot of water, if you get 1,000 that carry a gallon each, that's 1,000 gallons being delivered at one time. I've seen some proposals, very initial stage proposals for things like that. And then I think just getting into the larger, more complex drones that are going to be carrying more stuff, whether that's water to the fire, whether that's people, whether that's gear, whatever that looks like. And then in the future, probably remotely piloted air tankers, things like that. So I don't think there's anything, Brent, right now that's like chomping at the bit that I see coming around the corner soon, but a lot of good ideas from a lot of smart people out there.
What advice would you give to those that are looking to integrate UAS into their fire and resource management efforts? Maybe at the local, county, state level.
Yeah, so I deal with that a lot, and I would just say it's a lot more work than you think to start a drone program, to start a UAS program, a safe program. And a lot of people that don't have an aviation background don't understand the realities of putting stuff up into the national airspace and making sure that we're doing that safely. And I can only hammer one more time or a few more times the communication, coordination, deconfliction with everybody in that national airspace so that we're operating um, safely up there. So a lot of training goes on with it, training to not only get qualified, but then stay proficient in our flights that we're doing. So if we're doing wildland fire or the National Park Service, we do a lot of search and rescue and law enforcement missions too with drones. And so how are people staying proficient, not just current with the training qualifications that are put out there by a particular agency?
All right, one last one for me. It's a little bit of a softball, but what do you think is most exciting about the future of UAS in public safety and conservation?
Man, uh, that's a tough one, actually. I don't think that's a softball question. I mean, there's so much. I just see so many missions that we're doing right now with manned aircraft that we'll be able to do more safely with UAS in the future. Whether that's you know counting animals, or herd detection. There's just so many things we're gonna be able to do in the future with it. So, and it scares the heck out of some of my pilots right now that they hate when I talk drones. They're like, that's our replacement. I'm like, well, it probably is, So it's just really that there's no limit. People, a harebrained idea today is reality tomorrow. So
Outstanding. Well, I'm going to open this up to the class. I'm going to try to call on order. If I screw it up a little bit, I apologize. But let's start with Tyler.
All right. Hey, Justin, thank you for doing this tonight. I'm a requirements developer for Army UAS. So I was kind of wondering along the lanes for you, like how are requirements developed for systems that you need, and that would help your situation, and then how are systems selected for fire operations?
Yeah, so the first piece of that, I would say, we're probably behind on that, as far as what are the requirements and designing a drone for those requirements. Really, we've just been, here's what we're trying to do, what drones are out there that can kind of do that. And we've been very limited because of a lot of things that have come down from much higher, administrations and stuff about NDAA compliance, and things like that. So I'm kind of dancing around your question, but we don't really do
Yeah.
that. Here's what we need. Let's purpose build something for it. We're just trying to use what's already out there. And I think a good example of that is like this aerial ignition part of it, that I would love to have a much bigger heavy lift, and work with the company to put a much larger hopper on there so we could do extended aerial ignition operations.
Did, I mean, and kind of going off of that, with the need for NDA compliance, did I guess fire departments or organizations have to say like switch out their whole fleets once the need for NDAA compliance came down? And then do you think they're better or worse off for having to do that? I mean, you don't
Yeah,
have to fully answer that, but
yeah, it's
um,
kind of a loaded question there.
I mean,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wouldn't.
something
I'd
I
avoid the.
wouldn't, yeah, we don't need to go that into it, but
So I
did they
can
have
answer
to
part of
switch
that.
their fleet out?
Yeah, I can safely answer part of that. So the feds were the main ones that were affected by the NDA compliance part of it, and we did have some DGI products that were DGI government products that were not supposed to be sending all the information back, all those safety concerns or privacy concerns that we had. A lot of the non-feds, so the states, the counties, the cities, things like that, they haven't had that requirement yet. Who knows what's going to happen in the future with everything going on, but so most of them have not had to switch that out. And they actually, in the last NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, that was just signed in whatever that was, January, I believe, there was a carve out for wildland fire and emergency services that it was not required to have NDAA compliant. But the feds have just gone down, we see the writing on the wall. And so we've gotten rid of, we're not buying any non NDAA compliant, even for fire operations. And better or
Awesome.
worse,
Thanks, Justin.
we'll see.
No, it's fine. Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it.
Next up, we have Joe.
Hi, Justin. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. Um, the question I have for you is, given the various needs you brought up in terms of managing the airspace and having payloads that could be heavier to deliver more water, or could withstand the environment in which they're operating, I was wondering, between all of those, where do you think the area is in need of most investment at this point? Thank you.
Specifically for airspace.
Yes.
Well, that's a good question. Like I said, one of our associate members is the FAA, so we have a couple of their reps that work with us. So I think I believe we're doing really good right now working with them to get over these airspace issues, that we're having. So some of the UAS regulations, we can work with them to either get a waiver to try things out or to figure out what looks right for this public safety mission that we're doing. So I don't know if I really have an answer that one or any of those is really on my mind anyway, is more important right now.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Next up, William.
Hey, Justin, you mentioned deconfliction being one of the three core principles. So I'm wondering, for some of the smaller quadcopter systems that don't use ADSB, what are some of those technological mitigations that you use?
Yeah, so really it's that goes back to the communication piece. We don't have a lot of technological stuff on the drones themselves. A lot of our operators will carry different ground control stations. We've talked about having a ground ADSB that we could see the other stuff up there, so they can't see us, but at least we could see them to make that deconfliction. And we are looking about what does it look like to have some sort of transponder even on some of our smaller aircraft. And I know that's a big ask because it can be pretty heavy, and we already have payload issues, but I think in the future that's going to be a big part of it, that everybody, and that's going to make the the manned aircraft side of it feel a lot more comfortable too flying up there if they can actually see you or see your operation out there too. But currently there's not a ton that we can do. It really comes back to that communication part of it of before we're launching, within our TFR, that we're talking with aerial supervision. We've ensured that the other helicopters are aware of where we're launching, what our mission is. We're aware of what theirs is, and just deconflicting that airspace that way. Or, vertically too, like we'll be operating, 200 feet and below, you can have above 200.
So you do rack them and stack them. You'll have different aircraft at different layers.
Yep, absolutely. So our aerial supervision will be top of the stack. We'll bring in our air tankers at a certain level. Helicopters will usually be operating 500 feet and below. Drones, depending on whatever we need, but 200 feet and below usually. But if we need higher, we can request higher. So same as every other aviation asset.
And forgive the unfamiliarity, with kind of your operations, but I mean, are you using from the military side, the equivalent would be a joint terminal air controller, a JTAC. Is that do you have somebody who's responsible on site for managing the aviation asset coordination, or does that get kind of handed off? Or
Yeah, no. So I'm not super familiar with that military position, but I believe so. We have what we call an air tactical group supervisor, who sits on the plane at the top of the stack, and he or she is the one coordinating everything below. And that's why they're at the top, right? So they can see everything below. So they're clearing in. That's where we have the fire traffic area. You have to get cleared into the fire traffic area. You're getting clearance. So if we have our air attack or air tactical group supervisor up, the drone operator is literally calling them to say, hey, I'm on Division Delta, this area. They're looking for that clearance to launch into the airspace, because we're controlling that airspace there in that TFR. So it's probably similar to Brent, what you're talking about.
Excellent. Laura, you're up.
Hi, Justin. Laura Dwyer, work for NOAA's Uncrewed Aircraft Systems Division. I was just curious, you were talking about the UAS data specialist. Are you guys trying to incorporate any AI to help with the processing of the data to get information in real time, or is it still all dependent on like a person reviewing what you're seeing and then coordinating the information?
So I'm gonna have to say I don't know. I'm not a data dork, and I'd have to get somebody who does more of the data part of it. Yeah, I apologize. I just don't know. I'm not that into that side of it, so I couldn't answer that. But I can look that up and get back to Brent to get you some information.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's always helpful because, we do a lot of conservation, stock assessments for marine mammals and whatnot. And so we're always trying to figure out, different techniques to be able to go into the counting, but we have lots of data dorks, I guess,
Sorry,
that do all that stuff and come up with new sensors. Well, if you are working with Jeff Chase or Jordan from OWA in the very near future, tell them I said hi, please.
Okay, well, I will. We'll do. And I'll try and get an answer for you on that question.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Next up is Mark.
Hey, Justin, thanks for the presentation. Yeah, you showed a great video of that from the spotting of that fire that was spreading from the ashes, or the embers that were flying out. It's got me thinking about the LA fire disasters and how early detection of fires would probably be a good thing there. Is there any discussions of using UAS technology for early spot fire detection and in areas like that around LA, or anything technologies coming down the pipe that you can discuss?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was just discussing this with someone else earlier this week. So from the UAS side, it'd be really difficult, from an airspace management to have a drone or a UAS up there that could have a wide enough net to be finding new starts, right? Unless you had a smaller area that you were kind of concerned about. What I've seen, or what's kind of coming down, some of our lookout areas, our lookout towers, are actually putting in sensors up on those that have a widespread over a large area that can detect brand new starts very quickly. There's also some low Earth orbit satellites that they're looking at that technology too, that can pick up a heat sensor or a heat signature. And depending on how accurate, maybe not accurate the word I'm looking for, but how sensitive they are to a new start. I think that's a more realistic, because again, with a UAS, it'd just be so hard to fly a wide enough area looking for potential stars, where you could probably easier get that with a satellite or something stationary that had a wider ground base, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. In fact, maybe the better application for UAS would be like a fire suppression UAS once the fire is spotted, right? Once that technology develops.
Yeah, and again, I've seen all kinds of proposals that it's you put in the coordinates, or it links up from a low Earth satellite, picks up a heat signature, and just there's drones already heading towards it to dump water on it, type of thing. So, but again, there's all kinds of airspace considerations, as you can imagine, sending autonomous drones to the national airspace. So,
Right.
Especially in the LA area.
yeah.
Omena?
Hey, Justin, can you hear me?
I got you.
Sweet. Thanks for taking the time to talk to our class this evening. I learned a decent amount, in particular, about aerial ignition for UAS. I did not know we use drones for starting fires. That's pretty cool. In regards to aerial ignition for UAS, you talked about pilots training in both manual flying and then hands-off in regards to air ignition. So what kind of parameters drive whether you're going to manually fly the route to start fires or just do a hands-off type of operation? That's what I was just curious about.
Yeah, no, great question. A lot of that's just going to come down to, part of it'll be the capabilities of the UAS pilot. Some of it's going to come down to topography, what the needs are on the ground, because a lot of it, we're not going to know right away how that fire is going to take off when it hits the ground, right? So if we're doing a
Right.
burn, especially on like a wildfire, right, when we don't have a lot of time to pre-plan it, we might be just showing up like, hey, we got to burn this out tonight. It's going to hit the subdivision. If not, so we'll go out, we'll start hand flying it, drop it, and be like, that's not enough. You need to slow it down a little bit and drop more, or speed it up. It's going, it's too hot right now. So it kind of just depends. I see a lot more of the mowing the lawn, if you will, plugging it all in beforehand with the prescribed fires. We've had that time to look at it. Someone's walked the unit. They understand the vegetation type, the topography a little bit better. Not that you can't do that on a wildfire, but a lot of times you're just going to need to kind of see how it's reacting and kind of hand fly it from that way. Drop a few spheres, back off. Okay, that's good or not, and then get back in there and do it. So that's what I'm saying. And not that you can't do either one on either scenario, but it's situational dependent.
Understood. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Next up, Alex.
Hello, thank you for talking to us today. My question for you, good sir, is going to be, have you guys considered utilizing a medium altitude or even a high altitude capable UAS similar to what the military or the government utilizes right now, so that it can provide a much larger view of the airspace? And some of those also can fly for much longer than conventional aircraft.
Yes. No is the answer. I mean, I guess we've kind of thought about it, but again, we get into a lot of airspace issues with that. We could adjust the TFR, I suppose, but again, we're still trying to be good stewards of the airspace and right size our TFRs to make sure that we're not taking up more airspace than we need to for our fire operations in general. I love the idea. I think it's great. I know we've actually, I don't say borrowed, but got some intel from some of the large military UAS, especially down on the border when we have fires down there. They'll just be giving us information, so we know they're up there somewhere, right? But an actual application to us, we're not there yet, I don't think, as land management agencies.
All right, thank you.
And then Leo.
Hi, Justin. Thank you for your presentations. Great information. My question was more on how interactive you get with suppliers, vendors, especially with maybe local ones. Like I saw on your list, the Skydio devices and some other ones that made like in Northern California and in the States. Do they take your input for different technologies that you looking to implement? For example, a different type of thermal vision or devices that can be attached to the Skydio. How interactive you get with suppliers and vendors?
Yeah, good question. I think it depends on the supplier and vendor. We're definitely a small fish out there. We don't have a ton of their drones, but we do provide them feedback, especially for some of these larger drones that we're putting the aerial ignition device on. So the company that makes the aerial ignition device works a lot with those companies with the drone company too, because it all has to fit together for us, right? So we do send them a lot of feedback back to those companies. How much they take that into account or not, I couldn't say. They seem to, when we have issues, they seem to get fixed or push out a fix for us. So it's one of those answers. I think it just depends on what the issue or what our concern is, and it depends on the vendor or the particular company.
Okay, thank you.
Well, excellent. Any other questions before we wrap up? Okay. Well, with that, I just want to thank everybody for joining us tonight, as well as a really big thank you to Justin for sharing his thoughts and expertise regarding the utility of UAS technology. This has just been a tremendously informative session. It really helps us to better understand the challenges and opportunities associated with the UCUAS within fire management and response. UNSY 501 students, remember, for full credit, you got to add your brief discussion entry, single text or video post by Sunday. As always, let me know if you have any questions and if there's anything else I can help with. With that, I'm going to really quick stop.